Let's look at what is some of the most important paradigm work of our time, and we can look at it in terms of a model of, first of all, understanding that garbage is an illusion, that waste is an illusion. It is what we call energy stored in a specific form that we lack the imagination, the vision, and the patience to transform into a powerful asset. So we make plastic bags and then throw them away, and then we lack the vision to turn that energy that's captured in the plastic bag back into something that's amazingly useful for human beings and the planet. So this is an illusionary dynamic, meaning we call it garbage. Garbage is simply the marker for our lack of patience and imagination. So the real resource, in terms of the Buffett-like thinking of buy low and sell high, in order to buy undervalued assets, you need to pick things that a given culture lacks the imagination to do anything with, and then turn those things through technologies that an impatient culture lacks the patience to develop into things that the culture actually wants. And as Einstein says, the same level of consciousness that creates the problem can't heal it, can't resolve it. The same level of culture that calls and treats percentages of its people like garbage because it doesn't know what to do with them isn't the culture that can resolve and solve the issue. So we have illusionary pockets of waste in landfills, in plastics, in homeless people, in mentally ill people, in abused children that are reenacting their abuse, in addiction, in compost. We have all these areas that we say we don't want this energy in this formation, so send it over there. We'll turn it into this formation. We'll take children and abuse them, and then we'll say, I don't want them. Go over there. We'll take people and remove their homes, and then we say, we don't want these homeless people here. We push them over there. We traumatize people into addiction, and then we say, we don't like addicted people, and so we move them over there. So this is the illusionary waste area. Now, the technology arena is the process of transforming the illusionary waste into highly valuable integrated parts in probably a more sophisticated design, meaning there's nothing special about a culture or a country that produces the illusion of large amounts of waste. For example, an American will produce technically according to what is called waste, i.e., we don't know what to do with 101 tons of stuff that we transform into that form. Meaning the typical American generates 102 metric tons of stuff in a hole in the ground. So 1 to 200 pounds, as we're in a obese country, maybe 300 to 400 pounds of biological mass, generating not 2 tons of garbage in the course of the waste, not 200 pounds of garbage, but 102 metric tons. That's 200,000 pounds. So, in other words, we create 1,000 times, if we weigh 200 pounds, 200,000 pounds, we create 2,000 pounds. Per every pound that we are, we create 2,000 pounds in waste. Well, that's absurd. And so there not being anything particularly special about that, we may need to invent a culture that has value, that perceives more value than our culture can perceive. But this is the technology to turn it into something And this is a mixed thing. When you turn something from a perception of waste into value, you change one of two variables. You transform the energy, or you change the perspective. Both need to go on. For example, people who are addicts are experts on what's dysfunctional about our system. They are our teachers. We just lack the imagination and vision to treat them as teachers, and so we throw them out and actively avoid dealing with them. So we not only create that problem, but we perpetuate the dysfunctional system by refusing to learn. So addicts and abused children are powerful teachers that can transform our culture. Mentally ill people similarly. And we also have this dynamic where in Stan Grof's work with transpersonal psychology, the boundary between the pathologization of consciousness, and where we have a DSM manual of mental emotional disease that has more than 5,000 designations, we just create endless lists of garbage, basically. We create this illusion of all these things that are wrong with us as human beings, rather than develop the sophistication to understand the complexity of the psyche and the complexity of us as human beings trying to be born. You see, when you have a narrow culture and you have a spherical object, half of the spherical dimension doesn't fit into the box. And what we do is, rather than challenge the box to grow bigger and include all that we are, what we do is the opposite. We chop off, shame, avoid, refuse to grow and deal with a good chunk of who we are, and say that our narrow box is the be-all and end-all of everything. And if anyone doesn't fit into it, then there's something wrong with them. This is very limited thinking. It's not that you can't say that that's true. It's just the kind of thinking that keeps us small. This is a bigger shape than this, which means there's more complexity, there's more symmetry, there's more grace. Why not make the challenge be to grow our culture to a point where it can include more of who we are, rather than make the challenge to throw out and discard and shame and bully and humiliate everything that doesn't fit within the narrowness of our culture. So we have two different thought patterns. One challenges us to grow as a culture. The other creates the illusion of garbage. So as we change our perspective, we start to see value and capitalize upon that value in ways that we currently lack the ability to do. We also then transform something into something much more usable. But we need technology. We need technology. And so I believe that in the next 100 years, one of the greatest businesses or things to be in will be the recycling of natural waste areas. In other words, I believe that currently our model of paying money to transport stuff we don't know what to do with to big holes in the ground, and then paying people with big holes in the ground lots of money to take our stuff and bury it, I believe that process will reverse, because I believe that we're too impatient and too creative as a species to stay stuck in the narrow view that sees everything that doesn't fit into our box as garbage, rather than taking the challenge to grow. So this is basically the core model of thinking and paradigm. And then the question is, how do we measure and take people? How do we harness time, natural resources, money, and initiative to facilitate this process, both of waste matter and waste people and waste ideas. How do we facilitate this change? Now, I think the first thing that we need to do is create an objective metric of well-being and to measure it, to measure the well-being of everyone involved in the enterprise, measure the well-being of every individual, and to look for steady growth of between 10 and 300% per year. And we want to see that both as an overall demographic, and we also want to see that on an individual basis. And we want to own and learn that where we fail, meaning the individuals that go downhill within our technology, are symptoms of our lack of sophisticated technology. They're not symptoms of something innately wrong with the universe or innately wrong with a biological system that this Earth has successfully created for billions of years. So with that in mind, measuring the well-being of everyone involved and creating a framework where we look at return on investment for energy invested, natural resources invested, time invested, money invested, and how much energy are we able to unlock in a form that creates sustainable well-being for human beings. We want to measure that relative to the status quo, because this is not happening in a vacuum and it's not going to be perfect. But what we want to do is reach for something that's 10 times or 1,000% better than the current status quo. Status quo, X amount of money being spent to create bottomless pits of garbage at 102 tons per person that stays there forever. New system, spend half the money to make money, creating vast amounts of natural resources in ways that we currently lack the ability to imagine. Current system, people going from childhood abuse, being shamed and neglected and marginalized in our culture, into addiction, not contributing in taxes, etc., and spending up to $60,000 a year to manage, quote, dysfunctional people that we induce into a dysfunctional culture and then leave there in an incompetent state, to bring that person back into a functioning level where they're actually contributing. We can measure the impact of this. Now, in terms of the energy, we have different platforms. We have giving, we have investing, we have loaning, and we have building. Investing in the future and investing in a world for other people, nonprofits, donations, etc. We have giving of time, giving of money, again, to help people, understanding that as we give and learn how to help that which is undesirable and undervalued in other people, we do the same for ourselves. We create a healthier world. Loaning is a real possibility in a paradigm that can create 10 times more value than the status quo. A loan can be repaid, and so it's not the primary goal, but if you need $1 billion to invest in an infrastructure that's going to return 1,000% on investment, and you don't have a government with the political courage to make that $1 billion investment, and you and I don't have the billion, then creating a loan infrastructure based on a cash flow plan that has a 10 to 20 year return of 7% is quite easy. And why not do it for 10 or 20%? Mostly so that more of that money can go back into the process of investing in R&D, so that we have more and more technologies and apps tracking in real time the well-being of every single person involved, physically, emotionally, mentally, and financially. So you can invest for a speculative amount of return, and you can also loan money. The key with large R&D projects like this is a span of at least 7 years. And a 7 to 20-year bond makes a lot more sense and can easily be done at 10%. We have growing technology, which is one of the ways that we can take people who are most hurting, who are motivated through intense pain to develop and find the techniques that work. We can turn this into a powerful non-monetary motivation where people will do the work to find what does it take to take someone who's been highly traumatized, sexually abused, raped, and then discarded by the culture, and bring them back to a state where they are valuable, understand their value, and contributing. What does that take? These people go from being unwanted garbage because we don't have the intelligence to measure their journey and learn from them, to being our greatest hope as a planet as we move towards an interplanetary species. So growing wealth, mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, and it's important to have symmetry. The circle is a key thing here, because one of the things you'll find, whether you listen to interviews of Jim Carrey, his great retrospective of his Andy Kaufman movie, Man on the Moon, you find one person after the other that climbs a faulty system in Western culture, has tens of millions of dollars, is the top of their game, known worldwide, etc., and feels like absolute shit inside because we don't have a balanced well-being metric. We measure the outer, but not the inner. We measure the body, but not the heart. We teach the science of objects and production, but not the science of recycling and the science of relationships. So we just need to behave intelligently. We're heart, mind, and body in a triad that's pretty equal. And for some reason, we just ignore 2/3 of who we are as human beings to obsess about the external body. And tracking is a very important thing with as many data points as possible, so that as our technology and app algorithms develop, the artificial intelligence that's looking for pattern correlation can tell us stuff we don't have the intuition to understand, or we have cultural blind spots so we can't see. Tell us what we need to be doing so that we can help more people with less wasted time, money, and energy.